Welcome back to the GenTwenty Podcast. I'm Nicole.
And I'm Marina. Today we're talking with Tess Brigham, an expert psychotherapist, certified life coach, and public speaker. Dubbed the Millennial Therapist by CNBC, she specializes in helping millennials discover their unique life path in order to go out into the world and make an impact. Tess, can you tell us a little bit about why you decided to focus on helping millennials?
Sure. So I often say that I didn't choose millennials. Millennials chose me. I've been working with people for over 15 years. And about 10 years ago, I opened up a practice in downtown San Francisco. So I'm out here in California. And with this idea of, sort of like all relatively new. And I was like, okay, well, I'll just get some space and whomever shows up. And what happened was that young adults started showing up, 25, 26, 27. And I was like, oh, these are these millennials I've heard so much about. And wait a second, they're not entitled or lazy or, they don't think of themselves as special snowflakes. Like, what's the disconnect between what the media is saying and what I'm seeing right in front of me? And it was really interesting because I had spent a big chunk of my 20s in San Francisco, and it was like flooding back all of my own feelings of being young, of like, well, is this really what I want to do with my life? And, how do I find, do I want to find love? How do I find love? What does that look like? And just all of the anxiety and stress that came along with not quite knowing who you are, but having to make all these big, big life decisions in the meantime.
And now a word from our sponsors. Do you hate your job? Do you feel like everyone around you has their career together and you're stuck in another soul-sucking job for what feels like 100th time? Are you asking yourself why it's so hard to find work that makes you happy? I want to tell you about my friend Serena and her program, Get Me Out of This Job. She's a career coach, and her program, Get Me Out of This Job, helps you find confidence and clarity in the next steps of your career. Serena helps you build a career around your life instead of you feeling like you have to build your life around your career. And I did her program, and it was life-changing. Before I worked with her, I worked 9-to-5 jobs and just was so miserable. I couldn't figure out why I was so unhappy. I went from job to job. And then after I worked with her, I became an entrepreneur, a writer, an author, a podcaster, and just gave me so much clarity, life-changing. So the best part is mention GenTwenty and you get 10% off your coaching package. Head to getmeoutofthisjob.co to learn more, or follow her on Instagram at getmeoutofthisjob.
So it was very interesting. But at the same time, I realized as these clients were talking, I was like, oh, well, the world that we live in is so different. We have social media, we have the internet, we have so many things that weren't a factor when I was young, and how these things really impacted young people and how they saw themselves and how they felt about themselves, and how that got in their way as they're trying to figure out who they are. So that's how it all came about. I got very interested in, what the 20s, what are the 20 something years all about? Like, what is the focus? And as well as the experience of, being young in this world. And so now, obviously, my millennial clients are all getting older, and younger people are coming in, and they're a different generation. And, but the issues and problems are the same. It's these core essential issues that everyone goes through at some point in their life. Even if you don't go through it in your 20s, you're going to go through it at some point, of asking yourself these bigger questions of, who am I? What do I want? Why am I here? What's it all about? And then having to make some decisions based on that, of like, who am I? Like, that really determines the kind of work you want to do, the kind of life you want to live, all of those things.
Oh man, yeah, we relate to that. GenTwenty is quite passionate about the 20s experience, and I know for myself, like, I went through that kind of identity crisis when I was a sophomore in college and had to pick a major, and felt like, okay, nothing matters. What am I going to do with my French major? And then again, when I was in my early 20s, I was working a job I really hated, and I was so stuck, and I struggled both times figuring out how to like move anywhere out of that stuck feeling. And I just remember like sobbing on the phone to my mom, like shaking, because I was so afraid about this like pressure I felt to pick the like ultimately right thing, and not, I think we get sold the idea that you have to choose your life path at 18
Mhm.
and you can't stray from it. And then people in their early 20s are like, wait, I'm not doing great. So everyone I know has had a quarter life crisis. And today we want to talk to you about breaking through that. So can you talk a little bit about like what this proverbial quarter life crisis is and how to start getting unstuck?
Yeah. So I often say, because people will come to me and say, well, I don't know, am I going through a crisis? Am I not going through a crisis? And I always say that, if you feel like you're going through a crisis, then you're going through a crisis. Like denying the feelings isn't going to help. So, and the other thing about the quarter life crisis is I think people think that it has to happen when you're, 25, and it can happen at various times of your life. Um, it's really about, a crisis is this, the best way to describe it is it's when you start to question, your life choices, you start to question, it's definitely an existential crisis around, who am I? What does this all mean? Why am I doing what I'm doing? Um, and I see a lot of the times that people come to me, and it usually happens closer to, 27, 28. Because I think a lot of times there's something about turning 30, right? That there's this myth in the 20 something years, right? That 30 is the end point, that by the time you reach 30, you're supposed to have the ideal job for you, in the most awesome relationship, at the very least, maybe engaged, or in a serious relationship, you have to have the fabulous apartment. Like your whole life has to be set and you're on your way. And if you don't have those things checked off by 30, that somehow you failed. And so a lot of times you'll see people that are getting closer to 30 starting to say, oh, wait a second, not only am I not there yet, but I've now been working, I've been in the workforce 5, 6 years, and I'm working in this job that at 18, like you said, that I thought I would love, but I hate. And I'm looking forward in my life, and I'm going to be working for the next 40 years. So is this really it? Is this my life? And so it's a crisis of, who you are as a person. It's a crisis of, how you want to live your life. It's a crisis of, how you make, what are the choices that I want to make. Um, but certainly it can hit people at, other times of their lives, and it can hit in smaller ways, in little small ways. It sounds like, Marina, you had a few moments in there of like having these little mini crises. But the best thing that I can tell people is that it's not so much about trying to define it. It's more about, what is all of this telling me? Like, how do I react to it? What do I do about these feelings that I'm having? That's the most important part.
Yeah, I think those are all such important points, and there's so much to unpack when it comes to a quarter life crisis. And I think that it is such an important point for everyone listening, that it doesn't necessarily happen in the middle of your 20s. Like it can happen in your later 20s. And as we approach this like 30, where we've put it as some kind of deadline for something, that it's really not a deadline for anything. It just seems like this big number looming in the future where you're supposed to like have reached some kind of finishing point. But what I'm really interested in is, why are millennials feeling so much pressure so early, and like what is leading up to these moments of crisis?
I think it's happening because, I mean, the best way to describe it is, I think it really has to do with this world that we live in today of social media and just general information. Um, when I was in my 20s, there was an internet, but it wasn't common, right? It wasn't like people weren't emailing each other so much, and there was no social media. And so my frame of reference was really sort of looking around at the other people my age and where they were in their lives. And it was like, oh, okay, we're all kind of poor and we're all kind of struggling, and none of us seem to know what we're doing. So you would look around and kind of feel like, okay, I'm in the right spot, right? Like There was the comparison. You might be able to pick up a magazine and compare yourself to some model or actor on the cover. But the world that we live in today, it's like, well, everyone has a platform. Everyone has the ability to share their opinions and their thoughts and feelings. And they also have the ability to share the story of themselves and their lives and what they're doing. And social media, is one of those things where it's real easy. All you have to do, if you're a young person today, is all you have to do is get on social media, look up a couple friends, and it looks like they're having the most fabulous life. The person that you dated in high school, or your former coworker, or you just go on LinkedIn and see what your former coworker's doing, and it seems like they're just killing it, getting all these awards. It's we have this platform now that creates a lot of anxiety and stress for people around where they are in their lives. And even though, because they've done research and studies on this, like, even though we intellectually know that, like, oh, my friend Susie, I know she hates her job. But even though you're seeing Susie, and even though she hates her job and all these things in her life, seeing her on the beach in Bali is still gives us that pang of, well, why am I not doing that? And she looks like she's having so much fun, and I'm sitting here working. And so therefore there's something wrong with my life. Right. So there's this constant feeling of not doing enough, not good enough, not, and even the fact that we now, with technology, things can happen so quickly, and so there's also
Mhm.
that part. We live in this real kind of hashtag hustle culture of being productive and killing it all the time, and doing 50 million things before 5 a.m. And that mentality that it is really hard if you're 27, 28, and you're looking at all of that every single day. Then obviously you're gonna feel this feeling of, well, I'm not good enough, or I'm not doing enough, or I haven't achieved enough, or it's the other one being like, it's too late, or I can't possibly, change courses or jobs now because I'll be way behind everyone else. So maybe I should just, suffer and stay here. And so I think this is why you're seeing a lot of young people responding and having sort of these moments in time. I mean, the quarter life crisis, the term has been around for a while. I mean, I remember even in my, like, before I was even in my 20s, like, hearing it on Oprah way back in the day. But I think it's so prevalent now just because of the world that we live in. And this is, we're not even really touching upon the pandemic and how that's
Yeah.
impacted everybody. But yeah, I think a lot of it is just this world that we live in that allows us to constantly be comparing ourselves to other people.
Oh man, yep. That checks out. As you were speaking, Tess, I thought about how when I was like 23 maybe, and I had just started writing for GenTwenty and felt like, oh man, I think I'm getting started too late in my writing
Mhm.
career. And that just hurts me to think about, because now I'm 30 and I'm really just getting started.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of it was the social media, which in 2013 wasn't even as big as it is now. But it was like that comparison is such a thief of joy.
Mhm.
And it's hard to, especially when your like frontal cortex or whichever part of your brain is still developing. I think we forget that we can stop comparing, and that idea of enough. Like,
Mhm.
enough is such an arbitrary word. Like, it doesn't mean anything if we don't let it. But what what can we do to break through that panicked feeling and reassess these crises we're going through?
Well, the best thing to do, the best thing to do is to um, give yourself some breathing room, to really be able to say to yourself, okay, there's something going on. I'm not happy in my life. There's issues that are happening. But instead of me trying to fix it right away or solve the problem or push it aside, the best thing that you can do is just say, okay, I'm at a crossroads. There's things that I need to change, the things that I need to do. Um, and I am going to give myself this time and space to figure it out. And, the first step is always this, giving yourself some level of acceptance and allowing acknowledgement and acceptance and allowing yourself to really recognize like something's going on. I don't need to fix it right away, but I do need to address it. And as strange as it sounds, when it comes to anxiety and fear, one of the best ways to deal with it is really just through the acknowledgement of it. What we tend to do with fear and anxiety is we either push it down, push it down, push it down, like pretend like it's not happening, um, and avoid it, or we get ourselves so wrapped up into it and then we judge ourselves for it. And really, the best thing that you can do with fear, and this is what I tell my clients, is make it your friend. Recognize like anxiety, fear is a part of life. These challenges and crossroads that I've hit are a part of life. And that while it's making me feel uncomfortable, while I'm unsure about what the future looks like for me, I'm okay. I will figure this out. I will get through this. And I don't really have, there's nothing for me to be afraid of. And really just being able to, when I talk about fear being your friend, it's really around seeing it as something that's there to help us. Because the crisis, if you're having a quarter life crisis, it's a good thing. I mean, my own quarter life crisis when I was 27 changed my life, and I'm so happy it did. It was horrible going through it. It wasn't fun, but it really was one of the best things that could have ever happened to me, because it really is there, when we feel anxiety, when we feel this level of discomfort, it's there to tell us something. It's there to tell us, something in your life needs to change. And that's okay. It's you're here to do this kind of work. This is why we're here to begin with. And then once you acknowledge and accept and allow, the next step is to really, start asking yourself these questions of, what is it that I think I really want? What makes me happy? A lot of times with clients, I'll have them look into the past of times of their lives where they felt really excited and inspired, and where it felt really meaningful to them. And like, where were you? What were you doing? What was that like? What values did you have? What is that? What were those moments? What were the elements that added to that moment that made you feel that way, as a way of really trying to understand, like, what are the things that get you wanting to get up every day and do, have your life, live your life. Um, and being able to look at that and really then identify where you are today, and where, do you have any of those things, or any of those things happening for you today? And, what needs to change, in your daily life. And the other part of it too is just allowing yourself to think about, like, what is it that I want to do? Um and not getting too attached to the how, like, how am I going to make this happen? Right? Like the whole thing of deciding, right? You decided to become a writer. It's like not getting into, well, how am I going to make a living as a writer? And how is this going to work? And I'm going to starve and I'm never going to have any money. It's a little bit of like, do you want to live the life of a writer? Okay. Is this what you want? Okay, let's start working towards, figuring that out and seeing if that's what you want to do, versus getting stuck in the, it's going to be so difficult, it's going to be so hard mentality. But it's really about the acknowledgement, acceptance, and then the exploration part.
And now, a word from our sponsor. Fandemonium Design creates wonderfully nerdy artwork that won't freak out your dinner party guests. Products including newly launched notebooks are stunning, chic, and wholly celebrate beloved moments in fandom. Visit www.fandemoniumdesign.com to see the full collections, and be sure to join the adventure on Instagram at Fandemonium Design. Well, that's like so much to digest. I'm just sitting here thinking about all of it. Marina and I, we're on a video at the same time, and we're both just like nodding the whole time you're talking.
I took notes. I was scribbling on Post-its, like, think about this later, come back to this later.
Yeah.
It's crazy because what you're asking about, the questions I asked myself when I wanted to become a writer, I had such little self-confidence and such low like faith in my dreams that I just didn't even ask those questions. And it wasn't until I also, like, I see a therapist for my anxiety, and working through some of my anxieties, I was able to start asking myself, like, do I really want to work in a job that I hate? Do I really want to feel this way? And it made me, like, brings back to the conversation we were having right at the beginning of the episode, where, it's like you graduate and you start your job, and then you're looking at the calendar and you're like, okay, 40 years from now, is this the life I want? And that's how I got through the last iteration of my quarter life crisis. Was, yeah, I tried the, like, traditional way. It's not for me. Now I'm going to try this. And um, it's just, with the inclusion of the last year and a half or 2 years at the point of this podcast, like, the pandemic has really changed a lot of things for people too. And Tess, you actually wrote an article for us on GenTwenty about the fatigue of last year. Can you talk a little bit about why this last year has been so challenging when it comes to our identities and paths?
Yeah. So, one thing that I think that hasn't been acknowledged as much as it should, though I have to say, one of the things about this pandemic that has been positive is I think we're finally as a culture, starting to uh, break down a lot of barriers around mental health and what it means, what it means to see a therapist, what it means to see a coach, what it means to struggle with mental health issues. Um, and I often say that young adults, millennials, Gen Zers are really the ones that broke down those barriers of being these generations that were willing to talk about, mental health and talk about these things. But one of the big things that's happened, is that no matter where you're at, no matter what your particular circumstances are with this pandemic, right? We all know that everybody's gone through something different. For some people, it has been devastated. They've lost loved ones. Um, they've, lost jobs, homes, their whole life has been uprooted. There are other people where it's been, not so intense. But no matter where you fall on that, every single one of us has, has had this thing happen to us that was out of our control, that we did not choose, that was out of our control, and that made changes in our lives, that, and the idea of this virus and everything that was happening created a lot of anxiety for all of us. And so everybody for the past year and a half plus, it feels like it's going on, it's just keeps going. We've all been struggling with this underlying, anxiety and fear that's been inside of us. So even if you think back to the first couple weeks and how that was, and even if you weren't that afraid, or you're like, okay, well, I'll just stay home, the just the uncertainty of everything, the unknown of everything. If we think back to that time of, it's 2 weeks, no, it's a month, no, it's through the summer, now it's the end of the year, right? Like, if you think about all of this, we've never had any idea when this was going to end. We still don't even know, right? We don't know what any of this is going to look like. And so there is something very psychological about things that happen out of our control, things that happen where we don't feel like we have a lot of control over them. And also when we don't really know when it's going to end, it creates, even more anxiety for us. So across the board, we've all been sitting with a lot of anxiety and fear. And what happens over time is, and you talk about people that have like long-term PTSD, and we're all struggling with some level of PTSD because we've all been sitting in this place of unknown for so long. And now, as the year has turned into 2 years, that might turn into 3 years, like, it's staying with us. And so, it's really important to understand that maybe things that 3 years ago wouldn't make you anxious are now making you anxious. That having to sit with this idea of, I don't know what's going to happen next week, I don't know what's going to happen, like, that creates just a tremendous amount of fear. So if you take a step back and look at that, right? If you think about what that's like, it is incredibly tiring, right? To be at this heightened state of anxiety all the time. This is what's, I think this is what's created this this is one of the factors that's created this level of burnout that everybody's felt. But so, even if we've gotten to the point of being used to certain aspects of the pandemic, but if you really think about it, like, every time we leave our house, everybody feels some level of like, oh, should I get too close to this person? Should I wear my mask? Should I not wear my mask? What's the rule? What's not the rule? Right? Like, if I'm wearing my mask, is someone going to have an issue with me wearing my mask? If I'm not, is someone going to have, that level of what used to be just going down to the park has become something that is creating a lot of anxiety for us. And the other thing that I saw last year was, right, for a lot of people, so they're sitting with this free floating anxiety. It's staying with us. It's in there. And then the other thing was that people really didn't, most companies, what was happening was that people were just kind of like, well, I'm just going to keep working, right? Like my morning commute where I took some time and read a book, well, I'll just work now, right? After work, I used to go see friends. Well, I'm just going to keep working. So many
Mm-hmm.
clients were coming to me from different jobs and walks of life saying like, all I do is work. I work all day, every day. I work on the weekends, and because it's the only thing that I can do. It's the thing that I feel like I have control over. There's very little else I can do. So that's what I'm going to do. And then that coupled with not taking any breaks, I would talk to people and they'd be like, well, why would I take a break? I'm just going to have to sit in my house. And it's like, well, but you wouldn't be working. Right?
Mhm.
Like you would take your mind, even if you were just having a staycation, just being away from work for a week or two is really important. So I think we saw that, right? Last year, it was building and building and building and building. And now here we are in this new year. And, people have been traveling a little bit more. People have been out doing more, but, it's not quite the same. And I think that if you really take a step back and look at it, it just builds and builds and builds. And so it's exhausting. It's
Mhm.
utterly exhausting for everyone. And that's what people are feeling. That's that level of exhaustion that people are feeling. Um, and and what happens is that because we live in this hashtag hustle culture of being all you can be, and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, right? We really struggle with this idea of what if you did nothing for a week or two? What if you just relaxed? What if you read a book? What if you did this? What if you did that? Right? That our culture doesn't appreciate or really value, just number one, saying I need help, but also saying like I need space, I need time, I need to do nothing. So you can see how this builds and builds and builds for people to the point of just being so burnt out.
Yeah, absolutely. Marina and I are huge fans of saying take a break. It's one of our, I guess, kind of the pillars of the work we do together. Um,
Mm-hmm. Take
and
a break. Take a
we,
break.
yeah, we don't think people take enough breaks or value rest as much as they should. There was another episode I think we did last season where one of the quotes we pulled from it was that I said that I'm so productive because I rest like 80% of the time or something like that.
And I just
And
said, I love that for you.
yeah, I don't know. It's something that I think we've both been thinking about a lot, especially coming up into this season where the world is changing. And I almost feel more anxious now than I did even at the beginning of the pandemic, knowing, I guess, like what wasn't going to happen. And now I still don't know what's going to happen. But I also have two young children that make me more nervous about things going on.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
There's
And yeah, I've been thinking about how people kind of take like a word of the year or something like that. And Um, I honestly don't remember what my word of the year was this year. I'm pretty sure I picked one, but I don't know. But I was thinking that for the rest of the year, my word should be slow.
ooh, I like that. My word is intention because
Mm.
um Tess, when you were describing how everyone has been filling their time and their like need for control with work, I was like, that's me. I was chatting with a friend last night and he said, "Oh, what have you been up to?" And I was like, "I've just been working. Like all my friends are living far away, so I either socialize with them on the Zoom or the iPhone. I'm 90, on FaceTime, or I work because I like what I
What else would
do."
you do?
Yeah, like, and all my hobbies are now like very similar to my work. Anyway, but it reminds me of the word intention was so that I would act with intention and not just like mindlessly work all the time, which
Mhm.
I'm bringing myself back to that, remembering I need to take more
Yeah.
breaks. But yeah, it's just the burnout is real.
Yeah.
And until now, it's almost become like a trophy or like a badge of honor where it's like, oh, I'm just so burnt out. I'm just working so much. It's like, we
Mhm.
shouldn't be proud of that. We shouldn't feel good about that.
Yeah, but we do, right? Like we our culture really does. Then, right, there's this idea of you have to be so burned out and like near, to the point of being admitted to the hospital in order to rest, right? We have this real idea that unless you're working 18 hours a day, or unless you've just produced this big amazing thing, that you don't get to rest. And what I just think is so interesting about technology and how it's changed our lives is just how, right, all these things that used to take a long time are so quick now. Everything is so quick. And it's even, right, um even when we text someone, if they don't text us back quickly, we're like, well, what's wrong with
Mhm.
them? Right? Like, because we have these expectations in people to always be on and constantly, they know that our phone is near us. So if we don't text back, then there is some reason why, or we're not, being as responsive. And it's, when you're talking about, Nicole, like this idea of the word being slow, it goes against this grain of what the standard of how we interact with each other, the standard of how we think things should be, the expectations that we have for things. I mean, God forbid, right? Like if you're trying to pull up a show on Netflix and it doesn't come up right away, I'm sitting there going, come on, come on, come on, come on, right? Right, because
Yeah.
it's too slow. But if we go back to what we were talking about in terms of social media, right, that one of the big myths that I see with young people and is that because of social media, because of sort of the explosion of reality TV and all these reality TV stars and Instagram influencers and people who, even in, these marketing people that are like, I make $100,000 a month and I can teach you too. And this explosion of these jobs, that what's really missing is this realistic idea of what it takes to build a career, what it takes to become really good at what you do. And the thing is that,
Mhm.
it takes a long time. It first takes many, it takes years. Some people, it doesn't take that much time. Some people it takes lots of years. But it takes some time to first figure out what kind of work that you really want to do. It takes some time to, really find that niche for yourself that's right for you. And then it takes time for you to get really good at what it is that you're doing. And so what I see a lot with young people is they're sort of comparing themselves to someone who is an Instagram influencer and making all this money and all of these things. That the thing is that in order to really build a career, and a career that's very meaningful and that's long term, it takes decades. And so it's so funny when you're talking about this idea of slow, that I think that technology and how quickly everything is, I think has really created this idea for young people, in the beginning of their career, that, oh, well, I should be really good at this, or this should be a breeze, or I should have figured this out already. And what I really encourage my clients is like to give themselves the space and time. I did not wake up at 22, what I wanted to do was so radically different than what I do today. And even when I decided to go and get a master's degree and become a therapist, I did not start grad school thinking, well, I'm going to be a therapist and a coach I'm going to combine these things together, and I'm going to work with young adults, and I'm going to help them do this in this way, right? I had no idea. And so it just, all of this process takes so long that it's really important that I love the word slow, because that's so critical, because it is, you have to recognize that to get to a certain point to achieve these things, that it is a slow process. It's all slow, but our expectations are so fast that that's another big disconnect I see with young people.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And kind of another side to the same coin is that, like, I think we all hold ourselves to the standard where we expect to be good at things right away and neglect to let ourselves believe that we can be bad at things for a while, and that maybe we should be bad at things for a while before we get good at them.
Mm-hmm. And not even bad, but just new, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
it just,
We can be new at it.
new, or young, or whatever the word is that you want to use. Yes, absolutely. Because I think that, and again, I think that the movies and TV and all of that, like, I always say to my clients, this is why movies and TVs have montages, because it's boring. Like, nobody wants to see someone paint a house.
Yeah.
You want to see the finished product of it.
Yeah, you want to see it in a 15-second TikTok,
Yes,
actually.
yes. And so it's the messy middle, it's the difficult middle, it's the ups and downs of the middle that aren't as exciting or glamorous or fun, and they're not talked about, and they're not, you don't see them as much. But that is, this is essentially our lives. Like, this is it. This is what's happening for us. And so that's when you have to take a step back and say, okay, I've got to learn to love the process of it, which is why when I was saying that if you're going through this quarter life crisis, to really be able to say to yourself, okay, this is what I'm going through, and accept it, and be okay with it, and say, okay, I'm going through this messy time, and I'm going to get out the other side, but it's going to take some time, just to allow yourself the time and space to do it, and to be in it, and not worry so much. Because so often we just want to get through things. We just want, I just want to get through this so I can get to the other side. And it's like, it doesn't always work like that. And nor should it, because it's these questions that you're going to ask yourself, these larger ideas and questions and all these things, that are really going to help you get to where you need to be. And if you don't take the time to ask yourself those questions, you're not going to get to the place that you want to be.
Exactly. Well, I think that is the perfect place to wrap this up. And so thank you so much for being here with us and sharing this story, and all of your work and your insights. We're so honored to have you on. So where can people find you?
So you can go to my website. It's just tessbrigham.com or tessbrighamcoaching.com. And I have a blog on there. I have lots of free resources on there, and I have I do a weekly newsletter called Sunday Mornings with Tess. So just go on my website and sign up for that. And what it is, it's the beginning of the week. I give you, I teach a concept, and then I give you an action item to do for the week to help you, boost your confidence, or, a lot of the things that we talked about today, manage your anxiety, whatever it is. And if you're part of my mailing list, I have some programs that I've created that are going to come out in November that I'm really excited about. So if you're on my mailing list, you can stay tuned to hear all about that.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
And we'll link all of that in the show notes for everyone. And yeah, this has been another episode of the GenTwenty Podcast. We'll see you again soon. Bye.